Hey y'all, PyroDrake here with the OAnalysis for episode 3, Champion. In this episode, we get to meet the other captives, get an idea as to how life was for them, and we get to see how OA has already had an effect on the Chosen 5. This has been my longest script yet, as there's a lot to go through, so let's get started. The episode opens with Nancy shopping in some big box club store when she's approached by a writer, Pat Noller, asking if she could write Prairie's story. Pat had written a story for a family in a similar position. A young boy, Jamie Price, was abducted at the age of 8 and rescued at age 15. Nancy initially declines, but ultimately decides to have Pat over to discuss things. OA tells them,
I think this isn't going to work. This is just beginning.
On her nightly walk, OA continues her story. While Hap cleans one of the cells, we get our first look at the containment chamber.
5 by 5.
As well as a quick look at the other captives, Scott, Homer, and Rachel. When Hap looks in on Prairie, he notices she hasn't eaten the food pellets that drop into her cage, as they make her sick to her stomach. She tells Hap she can't live without sunlight or fresh air the same way a sighted person would. One night, Rachel starts screaming for August, and Homer says,
"Enough, Rachel. You know he's taking her upstairs."
Feeling somewhat ambivalent, Hap takes Prairie upstairs so she can feel the wind and the sun. While Hap closes and locks the door, Prairie finds a knife and a loaf of bread. Hap, worried she might use the knife against him, watches cautiously. Instead of trying anything dramatic, she fixes a sandwich with some leftover chicken. Unwilling to eat unless the others can, Hap tells her,
"Make more sandwiches. I don't care."
Like he's talking to children, Hap tells the other captives they should show some gratitude.
Why do you have to fuck it up with mustard?
Once Hap leaves, Homer tells Prairie how he left his championship football ring hidden in Hap's medicine cabinet and asks her to find that and a piece of mail. His ex-girlfriend, Mandy, was pregnant when he was abducted, and he wants to send her the money that Hap used to bribe him. Prairie tells Homer that rather than trying to send his child the money, she needs a plan to try and escape. We then hear gas hissing, and Scott's cell starts filling with smoke. I like to think that Hap gassed Scott due to his comment regarding the sandwich.
Fuck it up with mustard.
Homer tells Prairie to get on her bed and cover the vent between the cells as we see Scott pass out. Back in the present time, OA sits in a bathtub at the abandoned house, then is joined by Steve. After some back and forth,
You said we were gonna help people. Did you mean like Homer and Scott and Rachel? So this is dangerous. Families suck.
Not the ones you build. Strange pieces. And they work. They don't look like they should, but they do.
Steve misreads the moment and tries to push OA's hair off her face. OA jumps back, then runs away. When coming back for his bag, French sees OA run out, visibly upset, and seeing Steve the same way, asks what he did to her.
Don't treat me like I'm some fucking pedophile or something.
Pedophiles are people into kids.
You're so fucking smart, don't you?
A quick fist fight later, French pins Steve before realizing it's not worth it to fight. The next morning, Betty is sitting in her car pounding a Monster energy drink. Respect. She's listening to her voicemails, all regarding the will and estate of her brother who recently passed away. The last message she listens to,
"Hey Otter, Theo. Just throwing out a line, see what comes back."
she plays back several times. Upon entering her classroom, she sees a crude picture drawn by one of her students. Initially disgusted, she stops herself and really looks at it. Upon a closer look, she sees it as a piece of artistic expression rather than a crude insult. While examining the drawing, Betty sees Steve pass in the hall and makes sure he's on his way to someplace. Steve sees the drawing and the box Betty put around it and, somewhat shocked, leaves her be. We then follow Steve to his destination, a special class for kids that require alternative learning, or a class for bad kids to learn online. This is where we meet
You see them better now, you little bitch?
Angie. Now, at one point or another, I say I love this character for pretty much everybody in the show at one point or another. Angie is probably the first one where I say it right off the bat.
There's no Euclid on my tits, you fucking freak.
That's my water.
It's an extra week.
How long it takes your dicks to get hard?
I love her. That night, Steve is late coming to the house. OA senses the tension between Steve and French and has Steve sit on the other side of her. She continues her story with,
It's really hard to kill a man. It's even hard to allow a man to die.
Hap has Prairie doing chores around the house. He trusts her because she can't see what it is he's working on. One day, Hap goes for some sleeping pills.
I don't like to sleep. It's a waste of time. But it's necessary, so... sleeping pills.
Prairie comes up with an idea to steal the pills, ground them up, and serve them to him in a stew that she would make. After she gets enough pills stashed away and crushed, she asks Hap to get the things she'd need for a beet stew. When Hap leaves to get fresh parsley from his garden, she puts the crushed pills in. Hap insists they eat together, so he fixes her a bowl as well. After a couple of bites, he starts to choke. It turns out
This vegetable stock has tomato paste. I can't eat tomatoes.
his EpiPen isn't working, so he tells Prairie to get his spare from the bathroom, threatening,
You don't know the door, come on. They're all trapped down there. They'll starve and die.
While searching for the EpiPen, she finds Homer's football ring, slips out of her hand and into a bathtub that has a woman in it, dead. She gets the ring just as Hap crawls his way into her and injects himself with the EpiPen. He tells her the girl, August, died before she got there. While going back to the kitchen, she feels a piece of mail in a pile. After Hap locks her back up, she begins to sob.
What happened?
He finally ass-fucked her.
Shut the fuck up, Scott.
As she holds out the piece of mail and Homer's ring, she tells the group that Hap is burying August in the morning. As Hap goes to bury August, Prairie passes the mail and his ring in a plastic bag through the stream to Homer. The mail is addressed to Verizon.
Those schmucks will think it's a prank.
No, they won't. I used to work in a call center. There's actual people there.
I always find that line confusing, as I worked in a call center too, but we had absolutely no interaction with the billing team. Anyways, once Homer writes down everything, he tries to pass it back. But it's gone. OA described it as,
An impossible hope.
now that it was gone, Prairie fell into despair. Homer tells her to stand up, jump up and down, and flap her arms.
Not silly, but for real.
Homer tells the group they can try again, then they start talking about what they're going to do once they get out. Rachel wants to sing a song for her brother. Homer wants to take his son to see things that he himself hasn't seen yet. Prairie wants to swim, and Scott,
I just want a fucking cup of coffee and a cigarette.
respect. Anyways, as Rachel sings the song for her brother, the scene ends. The next scene starts with Prairie almost in a daze as she pours Hap's coffee. As Hap is leading Prairie back downstairs, she asks,
What happens after the gas?
he tells her not to worry about it, and that all great work comes at great cost. She grabs a frying pan, smashes the window, and runs into a forest. As Rachel overlays with the song, It's a Wonderful World, Prairie gets to an edge and stops. She feels she's at an edge, but turns as if she's listening for something. Finally, this section will be spoiler-free. Feel free to close the video at the shown time code if you want absolutely nothing spoiled. Alright, so to start, admittedly, things seem to be moving somewhat slow. Arguably, this episode doesn't do much to further the plot, but it does give some insight to some of the characters. Beyond some friction between Steve and French, the only other important fact here is that Prairie got hit in the back of the head by Hap at the end. Even so, I still have a few things to talk about. First, when I said Steve was somewhat shocked by Betty, what do I mean by that? Well, when we're very young, our parents are essentially flawless. What they say goes. They make all the laws, and they are the jury and judge. When we enter school, the same can be said about the teachers. I don't know how it is for anyone else, but for me, school was always us versus them when it came to the students and the teachers. All my peers were people with their own individual lives, desires, and stresses. Teachers, on the other hand, were just an authority. It can take many years before someone can uncynically know their parents, and by extension their teachers, are just as flawed as they are. Parents, teachers, police, judges, all have individual lives outside of their role. Lives where they may have stolen things, knowingly or not, or enjoyed casual or even kinky sex, or had suffered heartache or loss. I could be off base, but the face that Steve makes towards Betty appears to be that of surprise and realization that she is just as much human as he is, and not just simply an authority figure. Next, I want to talk about her plan to steal sleeping pills. I'm an insomniac myself, therefore I've taken prescription sleeping pills for many, many years. My script is always for 30 days, and I'm always given 30 pills, one for each night. There were some months where I'd run out of pills on day 26, for example. I didn't drop any, so that's how I knew someone had been stealing them. I find it odd that Hap didn't notice the missing pills. Then there's the plan itself. She clearly states,
Hap got his food and supplies online.
it seems to me that if that's the case, and he knows he has a severe allergy to tomatoes, he would check the ingredients for everything he orders. If he knows he can't have tomatoes, something like vegetable stock should be checked before even ordering. Now, it would be presumptuous to say what I would or wouldn't do in her situation, as I've never been, and hopefully never will be, in that situation. Originally, I was going to say something like, well, what's the difference between Hap dying from sleeping pills or from an allergic reaction? Reviewing the episode, though, I realize I'm an idiot. Her line,
It's really hard to kill a man. It's even hard to allow a man to die.
pretty much shows me why I was wrong. She was obviously feeling guilty from just the sleeping pills alone. Hap simply fed her the seed of doubt with the line,
Stupid. You don't know the door code. They're all trapped down there. They'll starve and die.
it's true she doesn't know the door code, but if Hap dies, then she can call the police to rescue everyone else. From this scene, we can see the start of Prairie's moral compass at work here. Even though it would be their freedom, she still can't allow someone to die if she has the ability to save them. Even Hap. All of this leads back to the question, is she lying? With how long August was dead for before getting buried and the previous 2 points, it seems there's more and more evidence building up that she was making up the whole thing. At this point, we can start to piece together the background stories for each of the captives. Scott was a drug addict, Homer's ex-girlfriend Mandy was pregnant with his child when he was abducted, and Rachel has a brother who's in a wheelchair due to an accident she had when she was attempting to take her brother to Nashville. There's one other piece of Rachel's story that stuck out for me.
There was a lot of hate in that town. My father was like all of them.
It wasn't until I was writing this review that it dawned on me. I believe Rachel is actually gay. The way she speaks of the hate in her hometown, as well as the way she says,
He needs me.
granted, I could be reading too much into it, and it wouldn't affect the overall narrative anyways, but it's something I would find interesting to discuss further.
Right next to each other.
Going forward, I may discuss events from this episode and how it relates to the overall narrative.
Nothing more
I may touch on things that haven't happened yet, so if you want absolutely nothing spoiled, feel free to close the video or skip to the shown time code for the end of the video. If you don't mind 1 or 2 spoilers, feel free to keep watching. Moving on, I want to touch again on the short scene where Steve sees Betty staring at the drawing on her whiteboard. In the spoiler-free section, I mentioned how it appears Steve realized Betty is not just a teacher, but she has her own wants and desires. There's one quick scene in episode 4 where Betty asks Steve to help her pack up her brother's room.
I'm not getting squeezed.
So you're gonna let the old lady get squeezed? Are you high? Dude, come on.
By itself, it could just be Steve being polite to Betty. Given his reaction here, however, it could also be that Steve no longer sees Betty as just a teacher. Steve isn't the type to bend to authority figures.
She impersonated me!
Because I asked her to. Because I wanted someone on my fucking side for once, and guess what? It actually helped.
So it's no stretch of the imagination to say he would have no problem allowing a parent, teacher, or any other authority figure to get squeezed. To me, this episode is the first step to having Steve respect Betty in a way he would never respect any other authority figure. This is also the first episode where we get to see part of Hap's device. We have the dome, the handle thing, and an idea of what he did before making his drowning device. It appears he would bring his subjects upstairs and drown them in the bathtub. Now, I'm not sure what this could yield, as it doesn't seem like he's got any of his sensing equipment set up yet. Also, how long has August been dead? In the time it took for Prairie to learn Hap's habits and ways, steal a bunch of sleeping pills, crush them and make a stew out of them, Hap didn't bury her? Wouldn't she start to decompose or something? Based on this alone, I had thought she was lying about the whole thing. I've read people who think the description of Rachel's accident matches the accident Buck passes in the coming episode. I tend to disagree, mostly because the backpack that Buck passes isn't discernibly red, like Rachel describes, although the flares do give it a red hue. There could be some weird time mechanic going on we're not aware of yet, but they really haven't shown a physical object come from a different time. Finally, I got to thinking, who is August? We don't even know her real name, just that she arrived in August. I tried to see if there are any features on her face that indicated anything, but I came up blank. If you have any ideas, feel free to comment below. I'd love to see what others think on that. Well, that's it for episode 3 of the OAnalysis for Champion. If you actually watched this, thanks. Feel free to tell me how wrong I am below, or you can like and subscribe and that bell thing if you want to be told when episode 4 gets done. Thanks and have a great day. Peace.